Jeff Peterson from Heartland Farm Partners is our marketing analyst this week. Corn and soybean markets saw a huge lift early Monday due to continuing weather concerns. We talked with Jeff on Friday morning after the USDA released its much anticipated numbers on both grain stocks and planted acres. Maybe the major surprise this morning is that there really wasn't any surprise at all. As we look at these numbers, it's about what the trade was guessing. A little over in some aspects, but really, Jeff, there isn't anything to really be shocked about this morning.
You know, there isn't, and that was, I think, what the trade was really wanting to see is that, is there anything that's going to be a big surprise, or can they get back to trading weather? And that's exactly what they got today.
And we'll talk about that weather. Let's look at some of the numbers, and when we look at acreages, a lot of traders were expecting both to go up, both corn and bean acreage to go up, and corn goes up about 500,000 acres. Bean goes up just a little over 2.5 million acres. So there are some farmers out there finding extra acres, but no major change to the market because of it?
No, there really isn't as of right now, and I think the big reason is that everybody's still focused on what is the yield going to be. There is a couple things that we need to talk about in soybean acres, though. The soybean acreage numbers are assuming a certain amount of double crop acres. This report did run through the middle of June, and as of the middle of June, yet in some areas they may have been considering double crop, but we're questioning right now. We're wondering if actually through some special surveys later on that bean number may actually come down.
And when we look at yield, is anyone even looking at the corn acreage, or is it just all about yield right now?
You know, it is all about yield right now, and the attention's also thinking about, with prices going higher, what's the demand going to do? And I'd say in particular on yield, all the focus is on the corn yield. Very few people are talking about the soybean yield, but that's going to be more important as we go forward.
How so? How can it play in?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing on the soybean yield is the fact that if we just adjust 1 bushel per acre, and that can be a real easy adjustment on soybeans with some dry conditions, that means 70 million bushels less. And we're already dealing with a situation on soybeans where stocks are tight. They're getting tighter on the old crop, and they're extremely tight on the new crop.
And the other thing you mentioned before we went on air was corn harvested acres is going to be extremely high this year, or at least projected to be extremely high this year.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up. What USDA currently is using is they're using a percentage of about 92.9%. And what happens when we end up having a situation like this where acres are dry and not all those acres are going to be harvested. To give you an example, we looked back in the research, and back in 1988, that percentage fell all the way back to 86%. And in addition, in 2002, that percentage was about 87.6%. Now, to put that in perspective, if we would just drop that percentage from 92.9 to 91.9, that's a 150 million bushel difference on the bottom line, not changing anything else.
Let's take a look at the stocks numbers that USDA also came out with today. Corn stocks are down 14% from June 2011. Soybean stocks are up 8%. Soybeans really held on well. They saw more acres and they saw stocks up from 2011.
Yeah, and I think what was able to give them the support that was needed is everybody's looking at the stocks number and they're going, well, a few more stocks, 20-some million, 30 million more bushels, depending on what, you know, as you look at the numbers. But they're also thinking, you know what, China's been in there buying, and they're buying a lot, and we're really the only game in town right now. South America is virtually out of soybeans, so I think everybody's anticipating that we're going to see actually USDA raise exports, so they're not so worried about the bean stocks.
How much is South America playing in still? We knew a few months ago that margins down there, or at least yield down there, was going to be hit. How much is that still going to play in as we go forward?
It's going to be a big deal going forward, because what it's done is that because of the problems that they had, there has even been some talk that there could be soybeans leaving the U.S. and actually going down to South America, which usually it's the opposite talk that affects the market, but that is being talked about. What it does, it puts the U.S. in a position that we're going to be the only game in town as far as the exports go until they have their new crop. And we won't see bushels coming out of there again until probably the first part of March or even the latter part of March. So there's a long time where, you know, we are the only game there.
Stepping away from these numbers for a second, what are you seeing right now in ethanol margins? We've had news about 2 plant closings here in Nebraska over the past few weeks. What do those margins look like? Yeah,
what we're going to end up having to see is that margins right now, they are negative when you take into account all plant costs. Depending on the plant, one thing that's happening here, though, distillers grain is going up, so that's actually coming back and giving them some revenue. So depending on the plant, they may still be making money on running everything through, but it's just not enough to be able to go ahead and cover all their costs. So that is one area that if we take prices high enough, we'll ration some demand.
It's forecasted to be another hot week, not only across Nebraska, but across most of the Midwest. There are already concerns about what that's going to do to corn. How long can this play in here? because it already affected the market early this week, but how long can it keep doing that?
You know, and that's what's always hard about a weather market. Weather market like this, especially for the timing, we had crops planted early, and right now what that means is that at this time of the year we've got all these plants, for the corn plants, in their peak water usage. They're also determining the yield. There's a lot at risk. We're going to end up continuing to move this market higher until we get to a point in which the weather changes. And then when that weather changes, then at that point it's going to be a dramatic pullback. So that's what producers have to be prepared for.
With this in mind, are there some windows to sell here, some windows to make some money back?
You know what, I do. I think there is. If guys have some of these old crop stocks around, this has given us an opportunity to be able to start cleaning up. I wouldn't get rid of all of them by no means. And on their new crop bushels, this has also given us a point in here where they do need to get some protection in place.
Quickly on Europe, we're seeing positive news today, but as we mentioned before, it goes up and down by the day.
Europe does go up and down. We are getting some support coming out of Europe. They are talking about maybe putting some things in place that would help maybe guarantee some of their individuals with money in the bank that they are going to keep that money if problems continue, much like what the FDIC is here in the U.S. That's given us a tailwind, so that's actually helping these markets right now. But we have to realize they'll be back and there'll be problems ahead still being talked about out of Europe.